Hare Krishna. Please hear my humble obeisance. Glory to Srila Prabhupada. So, today we will begin our discussions on the 14th chapter of the Bhagavad-gita, titled The Three Modes of Material Nature. So, we will start with the first verse. Sri Bhagavan Uvacha Param Bhuya Pravakshyami Jnananam Jnanamuttamam Yajgyatva Munayah Sarve Param Siddhim Mito Gata. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "Again I shall declare to you the supreme wisdom, the best of all knowledge, knowing which all the sages have attained the supreme perfection." So the 14th chapter is essentially introducing formally the concept of the three modes of material nature or Prakriti. So in the previous chapter, Arjun had asked Krishna 6 questions and he had received 3 unique answers for it. So his question of what is Kshetra or the field of activities, the answer was Prakriti. And the 6th question of what is Prakriti was the modes of material nature. So this was one answer, Prakriti. The second answer that he got was for who is the Kshetragya or the knower of the field. And Krishna had said that he himself and the Jiva. So Krishna and Jiva are the knowers. They are the Kshetragyas. Then Krishna and Jiva are also the Purushas, the enjoyers. Different scope, but they are also the enjoyers. And Krishna and Jiva are also the Geyam or the objects of knowledge, that which is knowable, the soul and the super soul. And finally the question of what is knowledge or consciousness, the answer was knowing the distinction between them and the relationship between these 3 things: Purusha, the 2 Purushas, Krishna and Jiva, and Prakriti. So in the previous chapters, Krishna has described the Jiva. He has also described himself, the personality of Godhead. Now he is going to be describing Prakriti. So in describing Prakriti, Krishna will explain that how the living entity, the Jiva, that is distinct from Prakriti, that is superior to Prakriti, because he has said that the Jiva is the enjoyer and Prakriti is enjoyed. So the enjoyer is always superior to the enjoyed. So how does the living entity that is superior to the modes of material nature become entangled by the powerful shackles of Prakriti? And this actually is the predominant topic for the remaining chapters of the Bhagavad-gita. So in this chapter there is essentially 3 sections where Krishna will first describe that how does the spiritual Jiva become entangled by the material modes of nature. Then the second is how does the Jiva remain captured by the modes. So the first is the entanglement, and the second is the imprisonment. Then how does the material modes imprison the Jiva? And the third section talks about how can the Jiva escape from this imprisonment. So the key verse in the 13th chapter is verse 22. karanam guna sankasya sadasad yoni janmasha. So the repeated birth of the conditioned soul is because karanam guna sankasya is caused because of the association with the modes of material nature. So what are these modes? How does the association take place? What is the result of this association? What are the characteristics of a person associated with these modes? And how does one become free from these modes? So with this in mind, the Lord praises in 2 verses the topics that he will be explaining about the modes of material nature. Now Krishna says that this is the best of all knowledge. Now interestingly, 2 times in the past Krishna has made similar claims. In 9.1 he said Guhyatamam, that I am going to give you the most confidential knowledge. Then in the very next chapter, 10.1, Krishna says, Shrunumi Paramam Vacha, that this knowledge is even better than what I have given you, better than the most confidential knowledge. And here in 14th chapter, Krishna says, Param Bhuya Pravakshyami, that this knowledge is Param Bhuya, is even better than what I have spoken in the past. So one may wonder if Krishna is simply using this as a literary ornament to say, this is best, this is best. But actually no. Because everything that Krishna does has a deeper significance. So in 9.1 when Krishna says, I'm giving you the most confidential knowledge, he was speaking about Shuddha Bhakti, how he can be attained through pure devotional service. In 10.1 when he says, I will give you knowledge that is even better, then he is giving details of what he spoke in 9.1. He is not giving a different knowledge. He speaks the Chaturshloki, which expands on the relationship between Krishna and Jiva, specifically in the mode of bhakti. And then he also gives the practical ways in which one can fix one's mind on Krishna by meditating on his opulences. In 14.1, when Krishna says that I will speak more knowledge that is different from what I have spoken, then he is speaking about the knowledge that concerns the modes of material nature, because it is critical in helping an aspiring devotee free himself from the shackles of the modes so as to engage in the process of bhakti. So all these are essentially speaking about the same thing, which is how does the jiva re-establish the relationship with Krishna. In chapters 9 and 10, Krishna speaks about developing attachment towards him. And in 14, he talks about detaching from the material conception. They are 2 sides of the same coin. They are not different knowledges. Essentially, the same knowledge is being glorified with different levels of details. Prabhupada says that the knowledge explained in this chapter is proclaimed by the Supreme Lord to be superior to the knowledge given so far in other chapters. By understanding this knowledge, various great sages attain perfection and transfer to the material world. The Lord now explains the same knowledge in a better way. This knowledge is far, far superior to all other processes of knowledge thus far explained, and knowing this, many attain perfection. Thus, it is expected that one who understands this 14th chapter will attain perfection. How will they attain perfection? Because when they understand the nature of the modes of material nature, they can free themselves from the modes. And then they can engage themselves in the service of Krishna as explained in chapters 9 and 10. Okay, let's go to the next verse. Verse 2. Idam jnanam upashritya mama sadharmayamagataha sargipi nupajayante pralayena vyatanti cha. By becoming fixed in this knowledge, one can attain to the transcendental nature like my own. Thus established, one is not born at the time of creation or disturbed at the time of dissolution. So, when Krishna says that the person acquires a nature like his, it means that the jiva regains his original spiritual identity. So, just like Krishna is pure spirit, Satchitananda Vigraha, so is the jiva pure spirit with the same Satchit Anand Vigraha. Now, this does not mean that the jiva becomes Krishna. What it means is that the conditioned jiva, who was so far considering himself to be the material body, now regains his consciousness about his original identity as a spirit soul. And when the person has transcended material nature, then the person is neither disturbed by creation nor by dissolution. Next verse. Verse 3. Mama yonir mahad brahma tasmin garbham dadamyaham sambhavah sarva bhutanam tato bhavati bharata. The total material substance called Brahman is the source of birth. And it is that Brahman that I impregnate, making possible the birth of all living beings, O son of Bharat. So, in verses 3, 4 and 5, Krishna is going to speak about how the jiva comes in contact with the modes of material nature. So, Brahman over here refers to the pradhan, or the what Prabhupada calls the primordial soup, the original material ingredients of the universe. So here it is referred to as Brahman. Literally, Brahman means that which causes to grow. And because from this the universes appear, the pradhan is also called Brahman. So Krishna says that he impregnates this Brahman. What does he impregnate the Brahman with? Because Brahman is essentially material elements. They are inert. They lack consciousness. He impregnates them with the jivas. So when the jivas enter into the Brahman, then the Brahman begins to develop, and then the universes come into existence. Then the jivas, they use the material within the Brahman to take on different bodies. So previously Krishna had explained this in the 7th chapter, verses 4 and 5, Bhumir Apirnalomavu, where he had said that how both Prakriti and Jiva are his energies. Prakriti is his external energy and Jiva is his marginal energy. And then in 1327 he had said that everything that you see around him is a combination of Prakriti and Jiva. So here Krishna is talking about the beginning of that interaction, where Krishna says that I am the one who causes the jivas to enter into Prakriti. So one may say that, or derive from this, that Krishna is saying that I am the one that puts the jiva under the entanglement of Prakriti. That statement is true, but partially true. That yes, it is Krishna that places the jiva under the control of Prakriti. But he does so because of the desires of the jiva to enjoy with the modes of material nature. It's like when a person says that I want to experience driving at very high speeds, and then he, on his own, by his own desire, he enters into a car that is suited for driving at high speeds, and then he drives. So it is essentially the desires of the jiva that Krishna honors and gives jiva this material body. Srila Prabhupada gives an analogy that it is said that the scorpion lays its eggs in rice, and sometimes people will say that the scorpion is born out of rice. But actually the rice is not the cause of the scorpion. The eggs that were laid by the mother scorpion are the cause of the scorpions. So similarly, we look around ourselves and we see that there are so many living entities that are taking birth in material bodies, and we say that the material nature is the cause of their creation. But actually it is the seed that was injected by the personality of Godhead that is interacting with the modes. So essentially this verse is explaining how the jiva comes in contact with the modes of material nature by the actions of the Lord. Next verse 4. Sarvayoneshu kaunteya murtya sambhavantiyah tasam brahma mahadyone aham bija pradapita. It should be understood that all species of life, O son of Kunti, are made possible by birth in this material nature, and that I am the seed-giving father. So, based on the previous verse, one may say that perhaps Krishna's engagement is only there at the time of the creation of the universe. But in this verse, Krishna is saying that not only at the time of the creation of the universe, but the ongoing process of the birth of the living entities is made possible by him. So every time a jiva takes birth, when a soul is assuming a material nature and a material form, Krishna says that I am the Bijaprada Pita, that I am the father that is giving the seed. So what is the seed? The seed is the spirit soul. So not only at the time of the creation of the universe, but for all times following that, it is Krishna who is causing the jiva to assume various kinds of material bodies. And again, Krishna is doing this because of the desires of the jiva. So this is explained in the 8th chapter when the process of transmigration was explained. That based on what the jiva desires and deserves, the Paramatma makes arrangements for the jiva to take on a suitable body with a certain set of senses. So while Krishna is making that arrangement, it is based on the activities and the desires of the jiva. Next verse. Verse 5. Sattvam rajas tama iti guna prakriti sambhava nibandhananti mahabhavo deha dehanam avyayam. Material nature consists of three modes: goodness, passion, and ignorance. When the eternal living entity comes in contact with nature, O mighty Amra Arjun, he becomes conditioned by these modes. So, in the previous verses, Krishna had spoken about how he is the cause of the entry of the jiva into the material world. Now, in 5 verses, from verse 5 to 9, Krishna will speak about how does the jiva become trapped into this material world. And he is introducing the topic of the 3 modes of material nature: sattvam, rajas, tama iti, goodness, passion, and ignorance. Next verse. Verse 6. Tatra sattvam nimartvavat prakasham anamayam sukha sangena badnati jnana sangena chanaga. O sinless one, the mode of goodness, being purer than the others, is illuminating, and it frees one from all sinful reactions. Those situated in that mode become conditioned by a sense of happiness and knowledge. So previously Krishna had spoken about the fact that the jiva gets conditioned by 3 modes: goodness, passion, and ignorance. Now in verses 6, 7, and 8, Krishna will speak about the conditioning nature of each of these 3 modes. So this verse describes how the mode of goodness, sattva guna, binds the jiva. So this mode is characterized by knowledge and happiness. So the knowledge comes from an understanding of the real nature of the material world. The fact that it is temporary and not a source of enjoyment. Happiness is the peacefulness and tranquility of the senses. Together, they produce this sense of identity that I am happy and I am learned. But it's actually a misidentification, because both these are predicated on a material conception. Even though the knowledge is about the real nature of the material world, nevertheless it is material knowledge. And even though happiness comes from detachment from the material world, nevertheless it is in relationship to the material conception. And because there is no spiritual conception, it still produces a misidentification. Krishna calls Arjun Anaga, or sinless one, to encourage him that he is personally free from these 2 sins of the modes of goodness, which is knowledge and happiness. So why are they considered as sins? So Srila Prabhupada explains in the purport that as long as they have an attraction for working in this way, they have to take some type of body in the modes of nature. Thus, there is no likelihood of liberation or being transferred to the spiritual world. Repeatedly, one may become a philosopher, a scientist, or a poet, and repeatedly become entangled in the same disadvantages of birth and death. But due to the illusion of the material energy, one thinks that this sort of life is pleasant. So even though the mode of goodness appears to be the best amongst the worst, because there is real understanding of matter, there is real detachment, but the downside is that it creates a sense of false security in the jiva, and the jiva is not driven to look for the higher solution of spiritual emancipation. In practical examples, we have seen that at least in India, it is very difficult to preach to the Smarta Brahmins, the real ones who are well situated, very difficult to preach to them because they are very strongly in the mode of goodness. They don't feel the pangs of material misery the way those in the modes of passion and ignorance feel. So there is no drive in them to look for something beyond. And as Prabhupada says, because of that, they continue to take births. The births will definitely be privileged births, either by some kind of opulence of intelligence or wealth or fame, but nevertheless, they will be material births. Next verse. Verse 7. Rajo ragatmakam vidhi trishna sanga samudbhavam tan nibadhanati konteya karma sangena dena. The mode of passion is born of unlimited desires and longings, O son of Kunti. And because of this, the embodied living entity is bound to material fruitive actions. So in the previous verse, the word nirmal or pure was used to describe the mode of goodness. In this verse, the word raga or colored is used to describe the mode of passion. So in a person in the mode of passion sees everything colored by unlimited desires. And these may become attachment if the desires are fulfilled, or they may become hankerings if the desire is not fulfilled. So ultimately, the jiva is left with unlimited attachments and hankerings. So in this way, the Rajogun binds the soul by attachment to actions. And what are these actions done? With a desire to either retain what they have or to acquire what they do not have. In the 3rd chapter, verse 37, it is also mentioned that eventually the mode of passion will degrade into the mode of ignorance. So Srila Prabhupada notes that the whole material world is more or less in the mode of passion. Modern civilization is considered to be advanced in the standard of the mode of passion. Formerly, the advanced condition was considered to be the mode of goodness. If there is no liberation for those in the mode of goodness, what to speak of those who are entangled in the mode of passion? Next verse. Verse 8. Tamastva jnanajam vidhi mohanam sarvadehnam pramadalasya nidrabis tannibadananti bharata. O son of Bharat, know that the mode of darkness, born of ignorance, is the delusion of all embodied living entities. The result of this mode are madness, indolence and sleep, which bind the conditioned soul. So the characteristics of the mode of ignorance is delusion, madness, laziness and sleep. And the nature of the mode of ignorance is that it produces deeper ignorance, which is why Krishna says that know that the mode of darkness born of ignorance. So the mode of darkness is essentially ignorance. But because it produces more ignorance, it is self-perpetuating. The mode of ignorance is preceded by the word tu. So tu means but, to distinguish it from the previous two modes. So in the mode of goodness, there is knowledge. But in the mode of ignorance, there is madness or pramad, the absence of knowledge. In the mode of passion, there is activity. But in the mode of ignorance, there is inactivity. Now, one might say that even in the mode of goodness, there is inactivity. But that inactivity is coming from knowledge about the temporary nature of the material world. In the mode of ignorance, the inactivity is coming from tamas or ignorance. Prabhupada in the purport, he talks about spiritual ignorance. He says that in their madness, they are very reluctant to make an advancement in spiritual understanding. Such people are very lazy. When they are invited to associate for spiritual understanding, they are not much interested. They are not even active like the man who is controlled by the mode of passion. Thus, another symptom of one embedded in the mode of ignorance is that he sleeps more than is required. 6 hours of sleep is sufficient, but a man in the mode of ignorance sleeps at least 10 to 12 hours a day. Such a man appears to be always dejected and is addicted to intoxicants and sleeping. These are the symptoms of a man conditioned by the mode of ignorance. Next verse. Verse 9. Sattvam sukhe sanjayati rajah karmani bharata jnanam avritayatu tamaha pramade sanjayatyuta. O son of Bharat, the mode of goodness conditions one to happiness. Passion conditions one to fruitive action. And ignorance, covering one's knowledge, binds one to madness. So this verse essentially is a summary of the previous 3 verses in which Krishna spoke about the mode of goodness, passion and ignorance. So here he summarizes that the result of the mode of goodness is happiness. The result of the mode of passion is fruitive action. And the result of the mode of ignorance is covering of one's knowledge or madness. But the common thing in all these is that they bind the jiva to the material world. So whether it is through knowledge and happiness, whether it is through intense desires for fruitive action, or whether it is through madness or ignorance, the effect is the same, that they bind the jiva to the material world. Next verse. Verse 10. Rajastamascha sattvam bhavati bharata rajah sattvam tamaschaiva tamah sattvam rajastatha. Sometimes the mode of goodness becomes prominent, defeating the mode of passion and ignorance, O son of Bharat. Sometimes the mode of passion defeats goodness and ignorance, and at other times ignorance defeats goodness and passion. In this way, there is always competition for supremacy. So in the previous verses, Krishna had described the characteristics of these 3 modes. Now he is explaining that in any jiva, there is a combination of these 3 modes that are existing. And the combination is that sometimes there is goodness that is prominent, defeating passion, ignorance. Sometimes passion is prominent, defeating goodness and ignorance. And sometimes ignorance is prominent, defeating goodness, passion. So the main takeaway is that the modes do not exist in isolation, but they are colored by the presence of the other modes. And the second takeaway is that there is a prominent mode that dominates the other modes. Now one may ask that what determines which mode is going to be prominent and which is going to be the supporting or the subjugated modes. And that depends on one's karmas. So based on one's previous actions, the reactions will strengthen one particular mode and will subjugate the other modes. So if a person had performed pious activities, then because of that, the mode of goodness will be strong. If the person had performed fruitive activities, the mode of passion will be strong. And if the person had performed sinful activities, the mode of ignorance will be strong. Now, also we have to bear in mind that the jiva's free will is always there. So even though the modes may be strong, the jiva may choose not to act according to the modes. Because if the free will was not there, then this cycle would mechanically self-perpetuate. But the matter of fact is that the jiva has the ability to break this cycle. So even though because of past sinful activities, if the jiva is prominently in the mode of ignorance, he may choose to act in the mode of goodness. But what Krishna is explaining over here is what is the intrinsic nature. So just like there are three colors, red, green and blue, and by mixing these colors, one can create infinite number of secondary colors. Similarly, by the mixture of these three modes, infinite numbers of human natures are created. Each one of us has a unique nature. And each of this nature is a unique combination of these three modes. Okay, so we will end over here and resume from verse 11 in our next discussion. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai.